Hello everybody and welcome. To continue and strengthen the collaboration between Europe and Africa is very important to the University of Oslo. Our faculty has very successful exchange collaboration with the University of Western Cape since it started in 2006. Since then, we have had many students and staff on exchange to the University of Western Cape. And University of Western Cape have sent dental students, junior researchers and professors to Norway. Professor Osman has been a very important supporter and facilitator of the Faculty of Dentistry's exchange program. He was the Dean of the Faculty of Dentistry from 2010 to 2019. And he has strengthened the collaboration under his leadership. We are very grateful for that. At ODE, University of Western Cape has for many years been the most popular destination for exchange for our students. The collaboration between us was initiated by Professor Paul Barkvold, and Yusuf Usman was proposed as honorary doctorate at UU by Paul Barkvold in 2020. Professor Yusuf Ismail Osman has for many years been central to the development of dental research and education in Africa. His research has largely focused upon dental restorations, materials concerning their strength and use of it. He has supervised candidates for the Master of Science degree as a part of the WHO's Train the Trainee program, aimed at dental teachers from various developing countries. Osman has also been a member of several committees and commissions with significance of the development of dentistry in South Africa. Osman has also been the CEO of the Oral Health Center Department of Health, Provincial Government and the Western Cape. And tonight, Professor Osman will receive his honorary doctorate during a ceremony in the aula. It's a very great honor and pleasure for me to welcome you, and I will give you the floor for your lecture.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor for me to be here. I love Oslo, and I think it's a tremendous city, and the university is wonderful. It's been hospitable. It's been one of my pleasurable trips. Thank you very much. When asked to say something about the links and everything, I think hopefully some will come out during the presentation, but we can chat about that afterwards, so please feel free to engage. I used this slide over the last 10 years because basically this is what has given me my pleasure in life and what has given me the opportunities to achieve what I have. The one in the corner there is the University of Western Cape emblem. Umesh Bauer is here. He's the head of international relations at University of the Western Cape. And I'm sure he'll leave you his email address because he's the person who's going to take this collaboration to the next level. Umesh, thank you very much for that. The one on this side is the Department of Health, the Western Cape government. The university is duly funded, or dentistry is duly funded, because it's basically hospital-based. And it's an expensive program to run, you know it. The universities cannot afford dentistry on their own. They need an additional thing. But we also provide services to the people. So the Department of Health pays for that services. So these are the two funding agencies. And then the middle is the WHO collaborating status, which we enjoyed now for over 20 years. And this was initiated by Professor Martin Hobdell when he was dean many years ago. I've been very fortunate that I stand here today on the shoulders of giants. Deans before me have done much more than I have ever achieved, but they've set the scene for me, so I have enjoyed that. But to give you some background about South Africa, because we are in the position we are in now, it's not because just what is happening now, it's what has happened over the last 40, 50 years. South Africa was an apartheid state, and there was this dream to create 11 countries out of one country. The white was going to be white South Africa. And all the other dotted places were going to be homelands, where they forced people into those areas. So it was like tribal homelands, and we had 10 of them. And all those prime ministers in those 10 homelands, all they wanted was an airport and an aeroplane, that's all. They didn't care about anything else. So that's why we still have airports around all those dotted areas. But this was the legacy we had. And this meant that certain areas of the country didn't develop at all, and others became highly developed. So that was a problem. We then got into democracy, and the country was then reconfigured, and we now have 9 provinces. Health and education are devolved to the provincial level. So it's a quasi-federal system. The problem is that there's an equitable grant from national government to the provinces depending on the population sizes in those provinces. So you get a fair share. But because there are no facilities like in the Eastern Cape, people from here are dependent on services elsewhere. So they get the equitable grant here, but they can't use that money efficiently. They now move to the Western Cape. And suddenly there's pressure in the Western Cape on the facilities and everything, because the equitable grant was meant for the people in the Western Cape. But now they're servicing the Eastern Cape, the Northern Cape, and sometimes all over South Africa, because some of the best established facilities are in the Western Cape. So that puts additional pressure on the Western Cape to survive with the limited resources that it has. But just to see, because we know when we said we should discuss the similarities between this is the population of Norway. It's been constant for about 60 years. That was 1960, and that's 2020. And basically, it's been about 5 million or thereabouts. You know it better than me. This is the population of South Africa. It's 60 million. And the resources didn't grow like that. So there are challenges that even the new government didn't contemplate, because money is limited and the people have just grown. So that gives us the story of South Africa. And this is a slide of the previous rector and the institutional planner. It's the South Africa, a country of contrast. And you have people, we have South Africa, and you won't notice the difference from Europe and parts of South Africa, especially Cape Town. But then we have this part of Cape Town, this part of South Africa, and that's almost all over South Africa. Now, it's the numbers that's the problem. It isn't balanced, unfortunately. Then you must have heard, we all know about the Gini coefficient. Now, this is some measure of wealth or consumption in a country. And the story is that 1 is like a perfect number. If you have 1, it's a perfect number. In this case, you don't want to have a high number, because this implies that the difference is great. So there are only 15 countries in the world with a Gini coefficient of 50 or more. And South Africa is the highest. Not something we're proud of, we should be proud of, but it's the highest at 63. That means the discrepancy between the haves and the have-nots is tremendous. Norway is at about 27.7. I initially thought it would be closer to the 1, but it isn't. Then we come to the expenditure on health. It's not like we're spending little on health. South Africa, over the years, has been spending about 9.1% of its GDP on health. And Norway spends 10.5% of your GDP on health. So we're very similar as that goes. There is a problem, however, that the health expenditure share of GDP is 9.1%, but 50% of that is consumed by the private sector for 8.9 million people in South Africa. And there are 76 medical schemes. This is privately funded medical schemes. And the remaining 50% is consumed by the public sector. So you see the imbalance. Now, if you don't have a medical aid, you have a problem. And for that, I just put in something personal in here. These are x-rays of my wife. She was supposed to be here for this. And in June this year, she had a problem. She's got arthritis, and she had a problem with the right hip. When they took this x-ray in June, they said it was bone on bone, and she needs a hip replacement. In August, this is what it looked like. Fortunately, I had a medical aid, And fortunately, this professor in orthopedics is a hip and knee specialist, and he did us a favor and he did the operation. On the 3rd of August, this is what happened to the head of the femur. And that's the operation. Now, this all happened in a period of 6 weeks. And it cost us about 150,000 rand, or maybe a little more than that. But that's because I had a medical aid. But there are 50 million people that don't have this medical aid. And the waiting list in the state sector for a hip replacement is 2 years and more. The pain that you go through with this type of problem, and they can't do anything. The state hospitals are overwhelmed. And COVID didn't make it any easier because the list just became longer and longer. So the burden of disease in South Africa, not just oral health, but the burden of disease generally in health is very high. And the country is overwhelmed with this burden of disease. The one thing is the infant mortality rate. Our Minister of Health went into Africa and he chaired some health ministers meeting. And the other health ministers in Africa told him, "You're coming to speak to us, but you have one of the highest infant mortality rates in Africa." It wasn't a good thing, and he's very upset. So now he's putting in, or he's now changed, and there's another Minister of Health, and they're now making sure that they've divided those 10 provinces or 9 provinces we had into 50 some odd districts, and every district will at least have 1 obstetrician and 1 pediatrician to try and reduce the infant mortality rate. But it's a huge challenge. We also have leading causes of death. And this is the pre-COVID thing. Communicable diseases was still a leading cause of death, and the non-communicable diseases. And then we have some figures from the NHI pilot project. This is the National Health Insurance Scheme. South Africa wants to introduce a national health insurance. But where do you get the money from for that? They're already spending so much on health. So the proposal is that they shift some of the money from the private medical schemes to the government sector. All those people that are having private medical aids are being subsidized by the state because we get tax rebates because we contribute to a medical aid. Now they're saying that we're actually subsidizing medical aids and they want to remove the tax rebates so that money goes into the state sector and then they can cover more people. But I don't think it's going to be enough. So there's still lots of planning on that. These are infant mortality rates. In 1,000 live births, 10 die immediately at birth. That's currently the situation. In the first year of life, one in 1,000 will die. One per 1,000 live births, 26 will die in the first year of life. This is in addition to all the other causes of death. And under 5 mortality, there will be at least 32 people will die by the age of 5. 32 children will die by the 5. So the infant mortality rate is very high. And there's some trend. Then coming to the leading causes of death generally, tuberculosis is one of the killers in the country. It's different. The different racial groups, because of our baggage and our background as far as racial divides go, as far as the African population goes, tuberculosis is the greatest killer. Now that's a disease linked to poverty and everything else. We know that, and overcrowding and all. In the other groups, you have the diseases of affluence, like diabetes and obesity and all. But the majority of the population, TB is still the biggest killer. And then there are the other diseases. Then the data from the NHI pilot project. So they had these pilot projects, and they examined about 3.2 million children around the country. And these were the findings from those projects. So those children that they examined, 8,891 of them had speech problems. 34,000 had hearing problems. 119,000 had some sort of eye problem and needed that. And 336,000 needed oral health, had oral health problem, needed oral health. So the backlog is tremendous. They have to get through this backlog before they can start planning for the future. In the Western Cape itself, in 4 to 5 year olds that they measured, at least 73% of them had 4 rotten teeth. And then the 6-year-olds, and those are the figures, 12-year-olds and 15-year-olds. The bottom line was there were very few people, very few children, as far as oral health goes, that were caries-free, almost nothing. I mean, this is a common sight. in the Western Cape. It's just everywhere. And that's what makes our university such an attractive university for exchange students. We have this burden of disease, but we also have the technology to manage that burden of disease. So we can serve a dual purpose. And this is just another slide in the same thing. So coming back to this, and then besides caries, a unique problem to the Western Cape is edentulousness. And I was speaking to Carl the last time and this time. One of the requirements of our undergraduate students to qualify is to make at least 10 sets of dentures. And you at Oslo have stopped making dentures, I think. Or you only make dentures on implants now, or whatever it is. But that's where we can be complementary to each other. We can assist with dentures, and you can assist with implants. And when we can when we collaborate, we'll get a win-win situation for all. So there is this opportunity. So we have this high edentulousness. And for some reason, Cape Town is the worst in the rest of South Africa. People used to extract teeth just for the fun of it. As a 21-year present, they said you can extract your front 4 teeth. So we had what used to call a Cape Town gap, where people have the 4 missing front teeth, right? Yeah, that was the trend. It's changing, but it takes time. Gross caries, we have that, surgical removal. So the opportunities for managing these patients is tremendous. But that's where the Department of Health gives us that money, because we're managing. This is their service load. And as part of the training, we're doing it. So the students get the training, get the exposure. The Department of Health gets coverage because their patients are seen to, and it's a win-win situation. So up until now, it's worked. With my retirement, they've now split the post. There's a dean who's the head of the university section, and there's a head of the hospital, the CEO, who's in charge of the hospital. I advised against it, but it didn't, because each one wants their pound of flesh. And my reasoning was that this would create some sort of conflict. Who calls the last shots? If the dean thinks you need 10 dentures per student to qualify, and the head of health and the head of the hospital CEO says, no, I only can afford 8 dentures, then who pays for the difference? And where's the compromise? But they've gone ahead with this, and I'm not very optimistic about it. I pity my successor. And when I spoke to him before I left, he said, I'm only wearing one of your hats, you know. So I said, I wish you well. But it's important who wears the other hat. Because if the two can work together, you can still have a winning situation. But if there's conflict, and if the one tries to override the other, you're going to have a problem. So anyway, that's for the future. And Umesh will maybe, he knows my successor very well, so he'll bear with us. So there's a governance problem currently in the country. Because the funding for health and education is devolved to provinces, and certain provinces were overdeveloped in the past, but now are over-servicing the country with the same equitable share. And it's not working out. It doesn't make sense. If the funding was a national government funding, the funding could follow the services. But now it's funding following population, but not related to services at all. People come to the Western Cape and don't disclose they're from another province. They need help. And you're going to help them because they have a local residential address. They know family or friends or whatever in the Western Cape. And that's a service load. We have in excess of 100 new patients at the dental faculty every day. Now, this is in addition to all the booked patients and the appointment patients. Our totals for the year was in excess of 120,000 patients a year. So it's an excellent opportunity for services. Currently, the health sector operates in silos. And I'll show you that just now. And then the burden of disease needs priorities, the relief of pain and sepsis. This is just a division of that health budget in the province. And you can see that Cape Town was endowed with some of the best hospitals, and you've heard about them. Groote Schuur Hospital, where the first heart transplant took place. Tygerberg Hospital, which is close to our facilities. These are renowned hospitals, but they take a lot of money. And that's where 61% of that budget goes to hospital services. So there isn't much left of the rest of the budget for the public sector generally. And if you treat patients in a primary, in that central hospital, it's expensive to treat patients in that. It's good to send the services out where it's cheaper to keep the patients, to treat patients rather than at a central hospital. And that's one of the problems. Speaking about silos, the minister appoints all the professional councils of the health, of the regulatory bodies. So there's a health professions council, there's a nursing council, there's a dental technicians council, and a pharmacy council, and they don't talk to each other. Each one is responsible for their own accreditation programs, and each one is worried about their own curriculum. So that's where the big problem comes, because if you go and try and intervene here, they said, well, that's not your business, you should stay here, you know. And the doctors and dentists are here. The technicians are here. They want to merge now, but with certain provisos. Currently in South Africa, technicians can't treat patients directly. They have to react to instructions from the dentist. And they don't like that. They feel they should be the first line. So this council is fighting to do what this council is doing. And yet they're all appointed by the same minister. So that doesn't make sense. We try in our own way. We have a clinic in Gugulethu which provides primary healthcare services. We go out there, the students go out there, and they provide a tremendous service. They try and do as much as possible. Your students enjoy it there. And this is one of my key slides. I use it all over. This is one of your students that came out on an exchange visit. And those are the extractions he did in 1 week. Now, for a lifetime in Oslo, he may never do those extractions. But the experience they get is tremendous. It's different. It's not that they like doing extractions. They have to do extractions. There is no option. You cannot do root canals on all those teeth, right? I mean, it won't work. So what we're saying is health equity goal 3 is the state in which, and it's got all these things. What are the chances of us reaching that by 2030? Almost zero. We can try, we can go that way. But in our current state, we can't go there. We can't get there. It's a pipe dream. So that brings us to the social determinants of health. We are operating at a downstream level because that's all we can do at the moment. We're inundated with this. We should shift it up. But you can't do that alone as a profession or as a dentist or as health workers. You have to get the government involved. You have to get the people involved. You have to get everything involved so that you can change things at that community impact level. That will impact in the midstream and hopefully it will reduce the downstream. The things flowing down is unstoppable. Now, what do? Do you leave this and go there? You lose an election if you did that, right? Do you try and address this? And you can't do both. So that's our challenge. So that brings us to the social determinants of health. If we want favorable health outcomes, we'll have to address education, income, housing, and access to services. Now we'll go back to the pre-apartheid slide. The schools in those areas that they had designated as homelands are underdeveloped schools. No teachers want to go there. Those are in God-forsaken areas. No one wants to go to those areas. But there are children living there. They have to get through school. They have to live. They have to eat. But the facilities are not there. So education for those people is a problem. We have selection criteria where we choose the best matriculants in the country. So what happens is we're still training the well-off students. How do we get to this? Now, as a university, we're addressing those things, but it's going to take a long time because it needs a shift in the whole thinking, not just dentistry, but in the whole thinking of education to be able to change this. There was a classic story. A young girl was in one of the rural areas. It's called Bredasdorp. That's close to where the two oceans actually meet on the southern tip of Africa. She attended the local school there, and she didn't have physical science as a matric subject because there weren't teachers to teach physical science there. She had maths, but she didn't have physical science. Anyway, she applied for dentistry and couldn't get in because she didn't have physical science. So she goes and does nursing first year. And in that year, she keeps pestering me that she wants to do dentistry. That's been a lifelong dream and everything. And I said, no, you don't qualify. You don't have the subjects. And end of that first year in nursing, she gets excellent results. She comes back with the results and she says, please, And I said, okay, and I spoke to some of the heads of department, and I said, we're going to make, it's not her fault that she didn't have physical science. We're going to make an alternative. We're not going to use her as one of the numbers. This is going to be an additional number. So we're not taking away a seat from anybody. We're taking about 90 students a year, and we gave her that seat. And she qualified. And she came to Oslo. She was the last student that came to Oslo in 2020. And I insisted that she be one of those students because this was a success story that if she didn't get in, her life would have been different. And this just changed the whole life. And that way, it would change it for the family and everybody else. Now she's a first-generation graduate. The chances are that that's going to happen with her children. They're going to be graduates, hopefully. And that way, it's going to help us to change the system. But it's going to take a long time. I'm a first-generation graduate. But today, my 4 children are graduates. So I think it's possible. But have we got the patience and the time to get there? I'm not sure. Now, speaking about silos, there's a book called, this is the public health approach. There's a book called Road to Health. This is a 48-page booklet. When a child is born in South Africa or in the Western Cape, they give them this book. And this child, whenever they go to a clinic for immunization or for any illnesses or anything, to the day hospital or to the clinic, they have to take this book with them. And there, the doctor or the nurses or whoever sees this child needs to complete this book. It's an excellent project. In this book, there are 2 pages that look at oral health. And they trace oral health, a first appearance of the first tooth at age 12 months when they get the measles immunization. The person seeing the child is supposed to put in findings to follow up and sign the book. Then in the second year, which teeth are available or which teeth are present in the mouth. And then in the 3rd year, 4th year, and 5th year. And no one fills in this book or fills in that page. Now, if this was done, at least some of the caries further down the road, or at least some, it would have been spotted a long time ago. So you tell the nurses, but you have to look at these pages. They say, but that's not our job. Then send it to the dentist. But they said, that's not our job either. And the 2 clinics are so close to each other. The one in Guguletu is right adjacent to an HIV/AIDS clinic. But they don't send the patients to us. And we, of course, there's no collaboration with it. And that is the sad thing in South Africa, is that these silos are going to kill us. Because this book, the project is a good project, but it hasn't been implemented. And that's the challenge. However, there are some good things in South Africa. And you must have heard about this train. It's called the Pello Paper train. It's one of the attempts by the private sector, and it was the Roche company that funded it. Transnet is the company that owns all the trains. It's a government company. And they made this train available to do primary health care in all the areas. So it has all health specialities or all health disciplines on the train, excepting medicine. There's no doctors. But there's nurses, there's physiotherapists, there's occupational therapists. Dentists are the top of the pile, right? There's pharmacists, there's everything. So this train has been doing the rounds. So it started in 1993, and it was started as the I train. It was done from the University of Pretoria. And it started with 3 carriages, and it made its first journey from Pretoria, going down the South Africa, traveling around. Between 2003, 2006, we went through a very turbulent time when our president believed that HIV/AIDS wasn't a reality. He was an AIDS denialist at that time. But this train did wonders as far as HIV/AIDS awareness goes, just stopping all over and doing its programs. At that stage, it had 18 carriages. So it had grown in that period from 3 carriages to 18 carriages. And as they added professions to the train, they added carriages to the train. In 2009, it established cancer health awareness, also a good program. And in 2014, they said it's so successful that they added a secondary train. So they had Pello Paper 1 and Pello Paper 2. One starts in the north and one starts in the south, and they go right through the country. And their operations, the train stays at the station for 1 week. They advertise this before time so people know all around the areas, and they come in to the train. And there's all these coaches, one or other disciplines, psychologists are there as well. So, and they see the patients there over the week, and it's busy. There's a dental clinic on the train as well. And these are the facilities on the dental training. It's a primary healthcare facility, so it's not no specialized dentistry. And schools use this opportunity, primary schools use this opportunity to bring children to so that there's group education. And to support that, we have our own outreach programs where we send our students out to areas close to the facility, to our faculty, so that they can continue these outreach programs more than just the relief of pain and sepsis. So we identify areas and we say there's a community there, we keep them informed when we're coming, and we send our students out there. We have a caravan, the school just secured a new one, so it should grow as well. That's some of your students. You may recognize some of them. That was a couple of years ago. But they integrate with our students and they enjoy it. And I think that's one of the benefits of this program, that the cultural divide is nothing. It's a thing of the past, but it's so much more than that. It's just to try and experiment or experience each other's presence. The problem is that even at those sites, when the caravan gets there, there's this queue of patients waiting for pain relief, pain and sepsis. So wherever you go, whatever you try, you're going to have this problem, unfortunately. And it's across the health sector, it's not just oral health. Talking about silos, in dentistry we have a problem, and we spoke about it yesterday. The Health Professions Council has 12 boards, and it's the Board of Physiotherapy, Psychology, Medicine and Dentistry is in there. But then you get another board in the Health Professions Council, which is for dental therapy, oral hygiene, and chairside assistance. And these two boards don't talk to each other. They're in the same council, but they don't even talk to each other. The therapists want to become dentists or want to do the work of dentists. And the dentists hate the therapists. And it's something that if we don't resolve this, it doesn't help having different types of healthcare workers if you can't integrate it. When we spoke yesterday, one of the factors was the lack of governance as far as these professions go. Because there is a lot at primary healthcare level which can be done at this level. But these people don't want to work in the state sector. They want to go into private practice because that's where the money is. And they then employ dentists to work for them, to do the things that they can't. Because therapists can't do endodontics, therapists don't do dentures, and they don't do crown and bridge work. But they do all basic dentistry and extractions. It's sufficient to run a primary healthcare service. It'll be ideal if we can link these two, the therapy and the oral hygiene, and make that a state-supported function and employ them in the state sector to just relieve pain and sepsis. And then leave the other things for that, but it's not possible. So that's the problem. And the Dental Technicians Council, they have a council on their own, and they just do their own thing. So the training period is another thing. In South Africa, we have dental technicians. They're on their own. It's about 3 to 4 years. It's at the schools of technology at the moment. So they're not, now they're called universities of technology, but previously they were the technicons, sort of. Then in the faculties, we have dental assistants, oral hygienists, and dental therapists. It's 1 year, 3 years, and 4 years. Then we get, so at this level, they get a bachelor's degree. Then we have dentists, which is 5 years. They also get a bachelor's degree. It's not, in Oslo, a dentist is a master's degree. In South Africa, a dental degree is a bachelor's degree, 5 years. Then we have 6 specialties after that, which is 4 to 6 years after that. But that's linked to a training post at a training institution. That's 4 to 6 years. So the 6 specialties, and the most popular, of course, are oral surgery and orthodontics, the specialties that generate the most money. So that's the problem. So if we could utilize this workforce in a better way, there is a proposal, and I think it's something the government should consider seriously. It's maybe to make this, to reduce this to 3 years, but just to have 1 mid-level worker, and then to keep that at 5 years. So there is a sufficient gap between the two, but there's enough work for both of them. So that brings us to goal 17, which speaks about partnerships and integration and globalization. We have this WHO Collaborating Center, and we've had that for over 20 years. And one of the focus areas of that was to train the trainer. In Africa, I think South Africa was best equipped to do that. So that was, and that allowed us inroads into Africa. Our partners, we have University of Missouri system in the USA, and that's been in existence, Umesh, for about 25 years or longer. Yeah. And Umesh will be able to tell you more about our partnerships, but that's helped us a lot too. So the conditions of the WHO terms of reference was, and we've still got all those terms of reference, but the one we concentrated on at that time was provide expertise and specialized training to WHO and countries in the African region. That established our footprint in Africa. So initially, it was just the countries in southern Africa, surrounding Africa. So we trained dentists from Namibia, from Botswana, from Zimbabwe, Malawi, Swaziland, Lesotho, all those dentists trained in South Africa. The 4 schools in South Africa took care of that. And then Zambia and Mozambique. Mozambique was one of the outliers because they're Portuguese speaking, but all the others are English speaking, so it was easy. But then we went into Africa, and we concentrated on the English-speaking countries, Tanzania, Uganda, Kenya. We've had Sudan, Libya, Algeria. And then the word spread that we're training specialists in South Africa. And suddenly we were inundated with requests from the subcontinent, from the Middle East, from Kuwait. It was just everyone wanted to come and train there. But there's a limit because people came to train in South Africa, but then wanted to stay there. It's a nice place after all. But that defeats the purpose. If we train them, the idea was to send them out. And the Health Professions Council, had court cases against them because they said our training is the equivalent of South African graduates and they can practice in South Africa, but we have to go back. We also had a government-to-government relationship with the government of Cuba. And the Cubans came to South Africa to train medical doctors. And when they finished their agreement, they had to go back to Cuba. But they didn't want to go back to Cuba because they wanted to stay in South Africa. It's one of the problems. But I think it's difficult to stop that. So some way you have to find a balance where you say, we can train you, but we're going to send you back. And they're not very comfortable. But so currently they have different training numbers for a foreigner and a South African. So the one with the South African number can practice in South Africa, but the one with the foreign training number has to go back to the host country or marry a local South African. So maybe our ladies or men will get married, whatever, to foreigners. So our partnerships have been good. They helped address health disparities to ultimately achieve our vision of ensuring health for all. It's excellent because, and it's complementary at the moment. So it's a win-win for both parties. The pandemic has taught us all about the importance of partnerships for growth. And it's taught us that we can't isolate ourselves and hoping we're going to be protected from anything. It's a global village. Everything moves. And so we have to embrace that and say partnerships are the way to go forward. And we will gain global perspectives to use regionally. The opportunities in South Africa are tremendous. And this is what we should explore. So we can still serve our people and we can still serve ourselves with addressing these research opportunities. The high incidence of HIV, AIDS, and TB and tuberculosis, it's unique pathology. They found that people that were HIV, AIDS, and went on to the treatment of anti-HIV AIDS treatment also had benefits for TB. Now, there are relationships, and those are things we can explore. They also found with trauma, we have, on a Saturday night, you don't want to be in a regional hospital in the emergency unit, in the motor vehicle accidents, stab wounds, everything you can think of. Trauma. My son works in the emergency hospital in Khayelitsha, and when he's on night shift or emergency call over a weekend, that's going to be a bad weekend. So they give them the Monday off to recover from that weekend. But that's not trauma that it's good for experience. It's good to get the training done, but it's not good to live with. It did decrease with COVID. There was a restriction on alcohol sales in South Africa. So suddenly everything reduced. Maybe it was a good thing in a way. The high prevalence of dental caries, medical cases, these are there to explore. We can look at it and see what are the options. How else can we solve this problem? Congenital anomalies, cleft palate, cleft lip, and malocclusion and craniofacial. The opportunities for research, for all of us, it's tremendous. I think there's a potential here which we didn't explore enough. Currently, the undergraduate students, the exchange rates are excellent, but I think we need to explore those postgraduate possibilities. We need to explore the possibilities of joint PhDs. University of Western Cape, and Umesh can just bear me out there, I don't know, but University of Western Cape has now agreed that they will have joint PhDs where we can have a supervisor at Oslo and a supervisor in South Africa and do some work here and some work there and then decide where the degree is going to come from. But these are all potential areas that we can explore, which we didn't do enough of. And on that, I think I've said a lot, and these are the people I'd like to thank. My family, my wife, my children, the University of the Western Cape. I did say I'm a first-generation graduate in my family. Before our intake of dental students at the University of Western Cape, South Africa had 3 dental schools. It was the University of Pretoria, University of Witwatersrand, and the University of Stellenbosch. And between those 3 dental schools, they only trained 2 dentists of color per year. So the South African demographics as far as dentists go in South Africa at that stage was white, male-dominated profession. And then the University of Western Cape opened and it said they will train people of color to do dentistry. We were the first group that were accepted there. There were 25 students and 24 males and 1 female. It wasn't a popular profession amongst the females. And that's how the class started. When I left, it's now 90 students, more females than males in the class, and it's changed the demographics tremendously. The other schools have opened up over time, and they've started increasing people of color, training people of color, but it's just now that it's happening. But the University of Western Cape is the one university that has significantly contributed to the oral health workforce in South Africa. The Provincial Department of Health, they paid my salary, so I should say thank them for that. Our rector, Tyrone Pretorius, and Umesh Bauer for being here. I think it's very supportive, and thank you, Umesh. On that note, that's my story. Thank you very much. Thanks. He looks after me.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. The problem is that people I'd give the lecture to are converted people, so it wouldn't benefit them much because they know about it. And the people I should be talking to is the ministers, right? The ministers of health and the ministers of education. But their hands are also tied. You know, politicians are, depends. 2024 is an election year in South Africa. So I don't think they're going to be wanting to fidget too much with things now. And maybe after, but you're right. I think we need to bring this to the attention of the politicians, people that can make the changes. I sat on the Health Professions Council for 10 years and tried to bring the two boards together, and they wouldn't, because the Board of Dental Therapy and Oral Hygiene is so ingrained in itself, it's so established, and saying they've got ministerial powers. Why should they give that up? Why should they be subservient to the dentists? And the dentists are with doctors in the medical and dental board, and they say, why should we move away from doctors? They see themselves as medical doctors in that group. But they should be better placed with the therapist. So it's a tough battle, but it's, I suppose people will just keep trying to rectify the situation somewhere. Oh, it's different. That's the thing. You'll get a figure for the country, but that's been averaged out over the group. So in South Africa, currently, you still have to use race to say it's different for different racial groups. It's the lowest in the African group, which is highest as far as TB and HIV, AIDS go and things like that. And then it's higher, life expectancy is higher in the other groups, the Indians, coloreds, and whites. And the life expectancy in the African group is the lowest. But if you put that together and get a composite figure, it's not so high, because the majority of the people are in the African group. That's almost 80, 90% of the people are there. And they have a lower life expectancy. Then you have minority groups, and you have a high life expectancy there. And that's the problem. So race, unfortunately, is still a major thing. But that's the background to it, is we come with a legacy. And to break that legacy is going to be a problem. To destroy what was built over years is a problem. You know, just talking about hospitals, the Tygerberg Hospital, where we are associated with, was built it was built on a U-shaped structure. So the one end of the U was for people of color, and the one end of the U was for white people. And you shouldn't cross that line. You can't cross that line. But that was in the days of plenty. The gold price was sky high. Gold was still regarded as the gold standard before the dollar took over. And so South Africa did well. And they could squander all this money. And they did those things. Today, that hospital is one of the biggest hospitals in the country, but they can't maintain that hospital because the limited funds can't maintain this luxury. So now they want to build a smaller Tygerberg Hospital on the same premises, but open it to all. And that's the challenge. So the history, you can't get away from our history. And we wasted a lot of money. But hopefully, going forward, well, you've read about our problems now, so it's not so soon. It's going to take some time before we can restart building. Oh, it's, I think, like anywhere in the world, it's COVID-19 is like something we have to live with. No masks, no isolation. Vaccinations are not mandatory, but available. The uptake has been resistant, so it's like everywhere else. And we have vaccines available. We also produce vaccines in South Africa, unfortunately, but at one stage we had an abundance and we couldn't get it away to anybody else. Yet the rest of Africa is battling for vaccines. So, you know, it's, you can't believe what you hear. It's a country where it's a mixture of everything, right? But COVID-19 is under control at the moment in South Africa. You don't need clearance before you get into the country. There's no restrictions, so it's okay. With COVID-19, we had many people that lost their jobs or lost income, you know. So the government introduced a grant, and it was 350 rand per month for the family or for the person that lost his or her job. Now 350 rand, I'm not sure how that converts. Umesh, how does it convert to kronas? Yeah, you see, yeah. Now you multiply that by say 30 million people or so, and so the numbers it's a numbers game, unfortunately, and there isn't enough money to go around. The economy over the last 10 years or so also nosedived in South Africa with corruption scandals and everything. So there's even less money in the fiscus. There's an immigration trend out of the country at the moment, and those are people that can get jobs elsewhere and that are employable, and those are people that can contribute to the taxes, and they're leaving the country. Petrol price almost doubled over the last 2 years or 3 years. So the challenges are there, and there isn't going to be new money immediately. There'll have to be work at it. Investments don't come in. The country was downgraded with this Moody's grading system, and the country was downgraded, so foreign investment doesn't come in. It's still okay in the Western Cape because it attracts foreign investors, but the rest of the country doesn't. Johannesburg was the economic capital of South Africa, but the center of Johannesburg is isolated. People have left it. They go out to the outlying areas. And those are challenges. The South African airline is in trouble. They went insolvent, and now they're looking for a partner to buy half the airline so that they could refloat the national airline. So, I think to get that money is going to be a bit of a problem. We lost a lot. Please, Umesh. Yeah. Thanks for that. By the way, Umesh is heading Sanod. You've heard about Sanod. Umesh, you want to just say something? So his details will be available. Yeah, sorry. I think that's a topic for another day. Just 1 minute, sorry. Just about Africa itself, it's unique. You must have seen our footprint into Africa. But Africa was colonized by many countries in Europe, and they left behind languages there. So there are people, we did the Anglophone countries, all those English-speaking countries, but there are French-speaking countries that didn't want to collaborate with us. And there are Portuguese-speaking countries that are also on the outside of that. So that's the problem in Africa, is the colonial history is still there, unfortunately, and we didn't break down that. So there isn't a united Africa also. And we've been concentrating on the English-speaking language. It's easiest for them to join us. It's easiest for us to train them, and that makes it easy. The Arab countries are on their own, and they do their own thing. So it's still a divided continent.
Last question.
Yes.
Because you mentioned the possibility for
Yes.
and like ask you and Paul, who has been most involved in our cooperation, what dentistry do you think would be
You visited South Africa. Maybe you can help me there. What do you think would be a possible option for joint PhD faculties? The university has agreed to that, but projects that could bring it up. The dry mouth was one of the projects that you thought would be. Yes. But oral surgery itself, I mean, the burden of disease as far as oral surgery goes in South Africa, I'm sure your postgraduates wouldn't see all of that in. So as dean, it's up to you now to drive this process. Cape Town is a nice place. I mean, it's one of the. I'm not originally from Cape Town. I'm from the northern part of the country, but I never go back there. Right? That's the problem. Everybody is the gravity is drawing everybody to the Cape, and it cannot sustain all of us. But it's a problem. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.